One of the questions I'm most often asked is, why do some pianists progress more quickly than others? And there are many reasons. A lot of it is to do with practice, but it's to do with effective practice. And I will explain what I mean by that in a second. The other thing is consistency. So it's a bit like going to the gym. It's no good if you go once a week or once a month just before you meet your personal trainer for a session. You have to build. You have to build on what you've learned. You have to build skills. You have to build coordination. You have to build stamina. You have to build focus. And also your brain has to lay down new neural pathways. Your brain has to tell your hands what they need to do. Everything has to be speaking to everything else so that those connections become tighter and tighter and tighter. The more you do those movements correctly, the more solid and stable your foundations will be, the more progress that you will make. So, effective practice. What do I mean by that? Well, if you sit down and you practice is not about how long you're practicing for. Of course, you know, if you're doing an advanced piece, you can't practice it for 5 minutes a day and expect to get very far. But if you are practicing for half an hour, and that half an hour is just repeating from the beginning to the end and not stopping to identify what's tripping you up, not taking bars out and working on them in isolation. And I don't mean that you have to be in isolation. I mean the bars. You isolate the bars. So I'm really bad at jokes. You isolate those bars and you identify, right, what is tripping me up? You probably need to go back a few notes and you probably need to practice those links. And I will go further into this in other videos. But if you were to practice from the beginning to the end every time, and you've got errors, you've got tricky bits, you've got bits where you slow down and you change the pulse, and then you wonder why there's always that bit that's difficult, is because you haven't addressed what's going on there. And it's not about talent. This is just about consistency. It's about being methodical. It's about discipline. It's about being disciplined enough to really, really, really hone in on the problems. And rather than the easy bits, because easy bits will actually take care of themselves. So go straight, you know, identify where your issues are, go straight to them. Work out, right, is this happening because I don't know my right hand, I don't know my left hand, I don't know what goes together there, I'm not really sure which notes go with which, I'm not 100% sure of that rhythm, I can't get around it technically. Break it down into mini sections, so even fractions of the bar. Look at your hands. What are my hands doing? Are they getting in my own way? You know, am I not being consistent with the fingers? Now that is another thing. So this is one of my favorite kind of bugbears, if you like. If you're not consistent with the fingerings, how is your brain going to know? You're telling it, it's like programming your sat nav differently every time you go on a journey, but expecting to end up in the same place or the right place, the place you want to go. It won't happen because you've not given it the right information. So this is the same thing. So what I would really urge people to do is be consistent, be methodical. You have to be a bit of a detective as well. Taking the difficult bars and trying to memorize them, not because you necessarily want to play them from memory, although playing from memory is great, you know, if you can do it, if you enjoy doing it, and that's a whole different skill set actually, and if you are going to do that, you need to do that from day one, but that's another conversation. You actually need to just really identify where those issues are, and maybe just learn those bars from memory so that you know them on a different level, because we do know music on a different level if we memorize it. It's very, very, very conscious. Each movement is very conscious. We have a different kind of awareness. If you're just playing through, all you're doing, it's like you're meeting the piece for the first time. And it's like you're sight reading it in a way, because you haven't gone beyond the surface. You don't really know, what's the harmony driving this phrase? Where's the cadences? Where does this end up? Where's it going? So we need to dig a little bit deeper. But the biggest thing you can do for yourself is not play from start to finish. Go back to the beginning when you make a mistake. That's really the most destructive thing you can do, because what you're actually doing is you are practicing in your mistakes, and your brain is learning that they are the correct patterns. That's the correct way to go. That's the correct journey in your sat nav, and you are going to really struggle to ever play that piece fluently, because you have reinforced what's not correct, and then to unlearn that takes an awful lot of hard work, because you're learning it again twice. You've got to unlearn the wrong ways and replace them with the right ways. So think about this really carefully and be really disciplined. Be really consistent. Another good thing is to record yourself, because sometimes we don't realize what we're doing. So sometimes we hear in our head what we think we're doing, or what we want to do, how we'd like it to sound, but that's not what we've actually done. So recording your practice, this is something I urge all of my students to do, of all ages, and all difficulty, sort of levels they're at, because it's very informative. And in the practice room, you have to be like your own teacher in a way, or you have to be a bit of a detective, and you have to analyze and you have to work out, why is this happening? How do I stop it from happening? So recording yourself is a really good way to, first of all, hear what's happening, and hear in more detail what's happening, to look at what's happening, to be able to watch yourself and see, okay, I didn't realise I was putting this finger there sometimes, and then this finger there the next time, or I didn't realise that I was, leaping too far, overreaching, or I didn't realise I wasn't ready, I hadn't thought ahead. So all of these things, if you record them, record yourself playing, you'll find that's really helpful to identify some of those things. And then you sit there and you listen. You can listen with the score, and you watch and you look at what you're doing. And that's going to help you enormously in identifying what you need to do differently. So it's not that some people are super talented, and some people are super talented, but that's not usually what kind of defines progress, because, or influences progress. I've had many students that are really, really highly talented but don't want to practice, or don't practice effectively because they don't think they need to. And then you can get away with that for a little while, but as you start to progress, you can't, because there's too much detail in the music. And there comes a point where everybody needs to do consistent, disciplined practice. And so it's not about that. I've had other students that are not perhaps as fast at learning. Perhaps it doesn't come as easily to them, but they have progressed faster perhaps than the incredibly talented student that doesn't practice, because they have been really consistent, really methodical, really disciplined in what they do. Because without that, we can't have the flow that we're looking for. We can't have the fluent performances. It's a myth that we all sit down and just play fluently, and you know, it always makes me laugh when people say, oh, it must be so relaxing playing the piano. To be honest, it's quite the opposite, because there's so much attention to detail needed. And I'm not saying that in a way that I want to put anybody off, because it's an amazing skill to have. It is an amazing thing to be able to do, and a very joyful thing to be able to do. But the process of getting to that fluent performance is consistency, it is discipline, it is listening, it is working on the score away from the piano, it is making sure you're being really consistent with the fingers. The first thing I do when I get a new score is I work out what I'm using where, and I don't mean I'm going to write every single finger in a kind of playing by numbers way. It's key movements, because if you keep missing them because you're not in the right place at the right time, then that's going to interrupt the flow of your piece. So these are some of the things, just some of the things that we need to be thinking about, and I will go into more detail in each one in further videos. So do follow if you'd like to hear more.